And once again, I am in your ear. I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. My name is Kitty Obiawado, aka the Conscious Rusto. Sundays, I am joined by my colleagues. We form the mastermind, and we look at what is happening across the world, especially to our African perspective. Today's date is Sunday, August 24th, Black August, as we call it around here. The year 2023. 2025 in the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6266 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we realigned our cultural clock. We say, welcome to the seventh millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and on livinginblack.com. What a joy, what a pleasure it is to be with you today and on LIB Radio. Let me just get my mix all here together. And we are with you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Let me join in my colleagues. First of all, joining us somewhere from his hidden enclave on the East Coast, Brother Dwara. We have you in the house. Aquaba. Welcome, Brother Dwara.
Thank you, Baba. I appreciate it. Shikamoni to you and Baba Junius, and Ubuntu Ma'at to our global LIB radio family.
That's beautiful. Baba Junius, we have you in the mix as well. Aquaba, welcome to the show today. How are you feeling?
Adasi, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm feeling very, very well.
All right. And Dwara, I know you are feeling well as also.
Absolutely, and blacknificently. Yeah, we
Yeah,
here and we
magnificent.
shining. we
Yeah, that's
shining and
right.
shine swam on, right?
That's right. That's right.
I swam on.
There are a lot of critical information and critical sources of information that we do need to talk about today. Where do we begin? Let's begin. Dwara, did you bring anything to the table you wanted to put on the table?
Yeah, I know we have been talking throughout the years of the possibility of civil war within the U.S. And I found an article, Pentagon putting together a National Guard reaction force to respond quickly. And so that's something that grabbed my attention. Apparently, Trump is putting together this reaction force to respond to violent rioting at a very short notice anywhere within the United States. And they're calling it a permanent domestic civil a permanent domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force that will be deployed to tackle violent rioting nationwide and at a moment's notice. So I just wanted to bring that to our attention as well.
Baba Juniors, that sounds really quite serious. We're also seeing the news reports as of today reporting that Trump is considering following up his Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. deployments of the military. Now he's considering Chicago to be the third city on his list. Is all of this kind of adding up to the very strong possibility of a massive civil conflict?
Well, not only massive civil conflict, which I doubt is going to happen, you also have to look at this as a step toward consolidation of an authoritarian regime. Mm-hmm. There's some debate about the crime stats in these various cities. I know Philadelphia claims that the homicide rate is down, even though you wouldn't know it by the news. When you look at the justification, you really can't put your finger on a legitimate cause. I mean, he's coming in, he's essentially taking over the policing and putting his stamp on public safety. So that, to me, creates a problem, particularly when the localities, the governors or the mayors or the councils of these municipalities don't request the aid. I could see it if they requested it, but him just arbitrarily doing it and then having a list, doesn't look good. And I also think it's a trial balloon to see what the response of the citizens in those particular municipalities will say, as well as around the country.
As I examine this whole situation, there's so many contradictions that come into place. You did mention, Baba Junius, that the FBI, which carries the statistics on crime in the United States, have been indicating a slow and steady drop in crime rates. Every few years, there are peaks and valleys, but the general trend is a slow, steady drop. While at the same time, we have to acknowledge this, and this maybe goes against the grain of what we're hearing commonly, especially among pundits looking like us in the national media, is that the crime rate in the United States, across the nation, across the board, especially in the urban areas, compared to other cities around the world, the U.S. crime rate is appalling. It's an embarrassment, a national embarrassment. Point two I want to make is that he is right that these cities are being governed largely by Democratic Party forces, Democratic mayors, Democratic police chiefs, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I will say this much, this may be my most controversial note, but I can get deeper, that the Democrats have led us as black people, I think, into a trap. I don't think that Donald Trump is considered to be outside of that trap. We put a lot of faith in these Democrats, and the Democrats keep leading us to higher statistics on crime and other. The poverty issue is really the big issue. If you look at the wealth gap in the United States, that's directly related to the capital crime rates, the serious crime rates. There's a Pew Research study I cited about 4 years ago, which keeps leading us back to it's the distance between the haves and have-nots that's feeding all of this. So to summarize everything I'm saying right now is Donald Trump is not wholly and completely off base here, although I'd say his methods are very crude and he's got a real heavy hand and it's starting to look more and more like a dictatorship. Your thoughts, Brother Dwara?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with everything you stated. And I believe what's coming to mind is the new Jim Crow by Sister Michelle Alexander, who made that same correlation that mass incarceration is directly connected to poverty. And so that obviously is something that we need to take a deeper look at instead of just these superficial corporate controlled media ramblings about, this schism, I'm calling it, between Republican and Democrat. At the end of the day, and we saw it at Jimmy Carter's funeral, Obama and Trump were laughing nearly the whole entire time, exchanging joke after joke, big cat-eating grin smiles. Too many of us are led to believe that there is this schism. I contest that, and my contention is and has been for quite a while that at the top or the near top, they're all having dinner together and they're all on the same page.
Robert Junius, I had mentioned about the gap between the wealth and income gap in the United States as a primary cause of the capital crime rates, serious crime rates in this country. You've studied that as well, am I correct?
That's correct. And of course, we know that is a factor, but you also have to look at the policies. You talk about the Democratic leadership or misleadership. You also have to look at the policies. Go back to the George Floyd situation where Black Lives Matter and many of their colleagues and allies pushed for the whole notion of defund the police. Look at the outgrowth of that. And I was saying, I remember back then was the Falcon Forum, and we were castigating them for saying that. It sounded strange to hear black men talk about it, but you have to realize that when we talk about crime, for the most part, it's our communities that are under siege. So more and more, I know in, say, in Philadelphia, Sherelle Parker had to run on public safety because everywhere she was going, people were complaining about the crime, complaining about the drugs, complaining about the squalor. Particularly, Philadelphia became a poster boy for those open air market drug carnivals and bazaars in the Kensington section of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is tied together. Yes, you have to look at it as misleadership. Yes, you have to look at it as poverty, but you also have to look at it. This is an ongoing situation. It has. Think back under Reagan when you had the crack cocaine epidemic. So there were so many things going on. You had that. You had the morphing of the media into the ghettoization and the thuggerization of the media that many of our young people consume. And that was, 50, almost 50 some years ago. So you're talking about 2.5 generations. The economy has not improved for the vast majority of Black people and or people of color in this country. So you're looking at a tinderbox. And all it's going to take is some agitation, which we saw. And again, that's why I use the George Floyd analogy and the example. All it's going to take is some agitation by Soros or some of his people or some other groups to take advantage of the discontent, and you'll have major riots and disturbances, not necessarily a focused civil war or a war where you have distinct sides pushing for distinct and specific goals and objectives, but just chaos.
Yeah. Let's go to the chat. Let's welcome in our listening audience. And we have, of course, this is our Sunday broadcast, our biggest broadcast of the week. So we welcome everyone. Going to the audience, I want to say greetings to Queen Mother Kashiba. She's right there at the top of the dialogue. She says, Hotep, greetings to each and every one of you. Here, bear with me. Let me just figure out where this conversation is coming. Okay. Brother Nguvu is in the house. Sawubona, my family. Yes, Nguvu, I see you. Sawubona. Rory 10X is in the house. He says, last I heard, there had been 0 murders in D.C. since the National Guard hit town. 0 murders, and I going to trust you that you've done your research on that, Brother Roy. I haven't really been looking into it, but I think you're probably right. Shabaka is in the house. Greetings, Baba, panel guests, and LIB family. Rory suggests, according to his research, no murders in D.C. reported since the crackdown. Is this what D.C. needed? Or are the people just afraid of, no, I don't know what they would be afraid of. They were murdering people they should have been afraid of getting caught anyways.
Well, obviously, it's just like when you amplify the presence, it cuts down on the brazenness. Now, there are probably still robberies going on. There are probably still acts of violence and crime going on. But obviously, if you have the streets flooded not only with police, but National Guards folks who are taking an active role in patrolling the area or just their presence, just standing around, right? That's going to cut down some malevolent behavior.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because either side doesn't necessarily always bode well in the favor of those of us who do live in these communities and are hardworking, moral, good character, people, in line and in alignment with the way of our ancestors. You know, growing up, my grandmother always told me that one apple spoils the bunch. One bad apple spoils the bunch. And so it's tricky, but I will say this, that there is this pervading sense of lawlessness that I have seen in many cities, specifically in the Northeast. And it is a problem. Just the other day in the city of Boston, there was a squad of about 100 bicycles, including motor scooters, electric scooters, bicycles, motorcycles, pedal bicycles, that took over this highway, this major highway cutting through Boston, Route 93. And literally, these young people on bikes were just cutting through traffic on bicycles in the middle of a major U.S. metropolitan highway. And so it's that type of stuff that I'm seeing lately is, and again, I think of the color revolutions in that if you have a large unemployed male population in an urban environment, that is going to spell problems. It's going to spell problems.
Yeah, that is a serious problem. And it's not as if they couldn't find places to ride their bicycles, but it appears from what I'm hearing that they deliberately wanted to disrupt the operations of the city by doing it the way they did it.
Correct.
Yeah, several years ago, they had a similar situation in Philadelphia where the all-terrain vehicles were riding on the Schuylkill Expressway, which is a major thoroughfare, dodging in and out, weaving, and causing a lot of concern and stress. But they're also doing it in Fairmount Park, which is a municipal-owned park that is a major part of the city. So, yeah, their goal was disruption. Their goal was, I'm not saying they set out to be reckless, but that's what was a consequence of their behavior.
Now, we have to consider two things. Number one, what's next? I mean, if people in Chicago are going to be next on Donald Trump's hit list to deploy the National Guard, et cetera, they need to be warned in advance and take appropriate steps. And of course, the appropriate steps would most likely lower the crime rate, if only temporarily. Then one might ask, what city's next? Is it Philadelphia? I would say Philadelphia would be very high on the what's next list, considering the image of Kensington being sent around the world, etc. Would it be New York City after that? At a certain point, this repetitive pattern, either it works and Donald Trump is able to deploy the National Guard to D.C. for 30 days, get a positive benefit out of it, the National Guard and extra policing, federal policing withdrawals. And what then? Does D.C. go back to what it was before? Or is D.C. reset itself and in a new mode?
Well, one of the things we haven't mentioned is that 19 Republican governors are supplying their state guardsmen to DC. So it's not just Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump, and now his Republican cohorts are in on it, and they're supplying. So does that mean that they're going to supply troops for Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, and even some of the smaller jurisdictions where crime is rampant? So if that's the case, what does that mean? Is this the militarization of America?
Yeah. Or is this the end of random violent crime in America? You were saying, Dwara?
No, it's like I said, it's complicated because it's twofold. There is this pervading sense of lawlessness that I think, if we're honest, that all of us see. I mean, the amount of people I see just throwing their Wendy's and Burger King bags out the window at a red
That's
light.
right.
The, the number of times I walk down the street and I try to say hello to somebody and they look at me like I'm crazy, you know. It's complicated because it seems to be working according to some of our viewers, and at the same time, this can easily spill over into the ushering in of a more permanent police state in which we are all surveilled. And then at what point, where are the guardrails at that point? At what point, when does being a regular, hardworking citizen, when do we, as those people, then get targeted based on things that we say on social media, like what happens a lot of time in the UK? In the UK, I mean, there have been people arrested just for putting a tweet out or having an opinion that's counter to the prevailing social disorder over there, I would say. So it's a fine line, very fine line.
You mentioned the United Kingdom. look at what's there in terms of mass surveillance, in terms of closed circuit TV. Right. Now, in this culture, United States, there is surveillance. A lot of times when they're reporting about something happening, they don't go to the city-owned cameras. They'll go to somebody's Ring. Mm-hmm. They'll go to some business surveillance monitors or what have you. And several years ago, I wrote an article about it, saying back then that we were subject to surveillance at least 100 times a day, given all these different cameras that are available and that are working. So I'm saying all this to say, not only will you have the eyes on the area, but you're going to have boots on the ground, which means even more intrusions for those people who are really hardcore freedom and constitutional type, U.S. constitutional types. All those freedoms are being whittled away. Fourth Amendment type freedoms are being whittled away. And on some level, like we're saying, it's justified, but on another level, where's it going to lead? What does this mean? When you put all of this together, then you're talking about some of the technology that's out there that's being integrated into the system already,
right? And
part and parcel to, under the guise of public safety, you're also going to have this mass surveillance and monitoring, very similar to what we see in China. That's going to usher in some other aspects of the control grid in terms of the money, the social credit score, the smart cities, what's going to happen if you wander past your battery,
right,
past the area. And I see this every day, or a couple of times a day. During the pandemic, I started playing golf. And I went to this place, and I have a pass, a senior pass to this golf, and they use golf carts. It's called a geofencing. So there's a GPS that helps you know where you are on the course, but also if you go outside some boundaries, the cart will shut off. So one time I was playing, a guy hit a ball off the golf course onto a road, because it's kind of rural, and he went over there to try to retrieve his ball, and his golf cart cut off, so they had to push it back onto the golf course. So that's the kind of practical surveillance that exists now. So imagine what's going to happen with this enhanced technology that is put into place.
You have facial. I'm sorry, real quick. You have facial recognition software being implemented in New York City, in the state of Florida last time I checked. And also TSA has rolled out what they're calling like a fast entry, in which you just put your face into a machine and it scans your face and gets all those vectored contours and mathematical dimensions. They're rolling that out in U.S. airports. And then you also have the drone surveillance that different cities throughout the U.S. are rolling out as well.
There are a few comments on the excuse me, come in. They're on the YouTube page. I see Stray Godzilla in the house. He says, "We all know problems, action, solution. Are we forced to be unsympathetic to those who are victims of the regime?" And yeah, it's just really, it's kind of a touchy because we're caught in the middle. Are we to be unsympathetic to victims of the crime as well as the regime? So, there are victims in all of these crimes. He says, Junius, did you see Amanda Seals versus 20 conservatives? Quite a debate. Did you happen to see that, Papa Junius?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't even could think of who was Amanda Seals. I've seen her name around, but I just looked her up, and she's a very colorful internet influencer and pundit, etc. And I'll give her credit. She's created a brand, and that's nothing at all wrong with that. And she's created a brand around dialogue, and personally, I think that's a good thing. Stray Godzilla says one more comment. Neely Fuller explained we are heading towards a white racist refinement. Your thoughts on that? I would like to have both of your thoughts on Neely Fuller's explanations of what's going on.
Well, I'll say this: if you look at, and I frequent right wing sites just to see what they're saying and what they're posting, you have a like the Proud Boys and some of those militia groups who are reacting. The whole "we will not be replaced" movement that's percolating under the surface, where whites were petrified about the browning of America, and Trump took full advantage of it, and masterfully so, with his anti-immigration rhetoric and policies. And so I don't know, I'm not familiar with Neely Fuller talking about what the brother is mentioning, but there is a backlash. And you can see it and just go up on somebody like Paul Craig Roberts' website and look at the stuff that he posts in these various sites all over. And that's one of his major rants about how white heterosexual males are being discriminated against, how they're opposed to this DEI. And that's what Bannon and a lot of those people who have Trump's ear are saying. And a lot of his policies are the outgrowth of this, where they want to, take America back. So, like I said, I have to admit that I'm not familiar with Neely Fuller's take on what's going on now, but there are some things going on that you can see a concerted effort and a coordinated effort to address this take America back, make America great again, really translates into make America white again.
Dwara, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Again, much like the other topic we were just discussing. On the one hand, racism does exist. Eugenics does exist. And on the other hand, I do not submit, as a student of LIB for about 20 years now, I cannot submit myself to the belief that white people run the world or that they are supreme or superior for that matter. And so I think that if we're going to look at racism, we have to understand it in various contexts. Who is the enemy I once wrote? Is it the guy driving down the street in a pickup truck with a mullet and a Confederate flag flying off the back of his truck? Or is it the doctor that is pushing hysterectomies on our sisters, even though they may just have a fibroid? And so there are different levels to these things. And then on the other hand, we also have to factor in that now, if we're talking about the global, the unelected global elites, they're pushing really for an anti-human agenda. It doesn't matter what degree of melanin you have in your system, or what percentage of epidermal melanin that you have. And so those are just some of the complexities that we have to talk about, because I don't believe in making blanket statements, and I don't believe that all racists are the same. Just because some redneck cracker is afraid of genetic annihilation doesn't mean that he is in a position necessarily to be taking a large number of us out. Although I guess that's arguable as well. But these things are nuanced and need to be fleshed out carefully.
Mm-hmm.
But would you say that all of this is part of a larger? But we came on the program talking about a potential for civil war. Where does, and the brother talked about the Hegelian dialectic problem, reaction, solution.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this as a part of a divide and rule, divide and conquer tactic to push or foment this kind of reaction? Because one of the notes I just jotted down when we were talking about was the growth of incivility in this society.
Right.
Just being rude and crude and crass. And when that's energized with ethnic and color and class animism or animus, you're going to have major problem, which makes it easier for the people that Dewar was talking about, this unelected elite, the Peter Thiels and the Gates and that ilk, Elon Musk and that ilk, the people who are behind this dark enlightenment movement to get their program across, because they have definitely influenced the Trump administration, particularly through J.D. Vance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Baba. And what was I just going to say? I'll come back to me. I slipped out.
Okay. Well, I will say, to follow up on the question about Neely Fuller's perspective and his conclusion on this, I don't see a solution in it. And to merely just say, in whatever form the white man runs everything, one, as you point out, is not accurate. The white man's lost control now, and Asians are in a better position to say they run everything. China has surpassed U.S. economy in purchasing power parity, which is the most important measure of the economic GDP, is purchasing power parity. Japan and Germany remain the next two economies in the world. And so Germany is, of course, white men, undeniably white men, but Japanese people should not be discounted, especially right now, this week, when we see Japan holding a major conference with African leadership. And I hope we'll get to some of that dialogue on today. But personally, I consider Neely Fuller's conclusion to be too simplistic. It's much more complex. It's He doesn't say that the wealthy whites, there's a distinction between the wealthy whites and the poverty prone whites, which are the overwhelming majority of whites. The guy with a mullet and a pickup truck with a Confederate flag in the back of his pickup truck, he's not enjoying these benefits that others like Elon Musk and others are enjoying. So, to me, without a viable solution, I have a tendency to just dismiss Neely Fuller as background noise. But what solutions do I have in place? One would question me on that. I would say the best solution that I would have in place would be to withdraw, to separate, to create an arc called the Cuchichacalea villages, go rural where we live. Let's disconnect from DC, disconnect from Baltimore, disconnect from Chicago. Not completely disconnect, because those will be markets for our goods that we're producing in the villages. But we can come up with better solutions other than to say the white man runs everything. I heard one of Neely Fuller's strong supporters. We had a debate here between the Neely Fuller camp and our LIB radio camp one time, and that person said on the air, the white man runs the universe. You know something? When she made that statement, it was nothing but silence for 15 seconds or so afterwards. I was going to wait to say, who wants this one? But nobody wanted that one. It was a very sad moment.
Well, I think we're subjected to hyperbole. We're subjected to deceit all the time. When you look at this society and you compare it with African societies, not just the Nile Valley, but African societies that focus on good character, focus on harmony, balance, reciprocity, which was mutual aid and responsibility, social responsibility. Compare that with this society where you have major industries, PR, advertising, that specialize in deceit, they specialize in distortion, they specialize in creating an alternative reality that helps this machine go forward. We have to, in my mind, get back to our roots in terms of the Ma'at Ubuntu camp philosophy and go from there. Again, when we're talking about this situation, discussing these things, notice how game theory, how this applies to game theory, is totally absent. Why is it absent? Why is it absent? Because we're not in the game. Yeah, we're in the game, but we're on the periphery. We're not marshaling our own resources. We're not galvanizing. We don't have a centralized leadership. Not that that's imperative, but you do have to have some kind of leadership. And many times and occasions, our leadership is misleadership or it's compromised leadership. And it doesn't matter which, because the consequences and the results are the same. Disorganization, just unpreparedness, and we're just either major collateral damage, or we're pawns and puppets for these other forces in the game.
And that's a good point that you make. We need to be playing game theory. You were saying, Dwara?
So game theory. Baba ancestor Amos Wilson was very clear that we do not study military science, military strategy. And that is essentially part of game theory, right? And so
yeah, they are parallel forces. Military strategy implies that you're going to bust some caps on somebody, while game theory says you have many more options.
Sure. I thank you for that distinction. I guess the way I'm going with looking at it is that retreat is part of game theory, or is a viable military strategy, and it's not one that's based out of cowardice. It is strategic. And so there's a proverb that says the ram backs up but it's not out of cowardice. It's backing up to gain strength for itself so that it can plow forward and do what it needs to do to clear any obstacles that are in its way. So I say that to
Jack.
say that game theory, military strategy, retreat is a viable and a viable part of that. And by pulling back into a more rural environment where one can grow our own food, etc., Kujichagulia villages, that is not cowardice. That is a viable strategic move that allows us to gain enough of our own collective power to be able to do bigger and better things. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, good points that you make. A few more comments
Also,
have come. You were
also,
saying?
what we're looking at is a dynamic where we're seeing game zero sum game theory versus Ubuntu Ma'at.
Hmm.
And Ubuntu Ma'at is latent. We have it in our consciousness. We just haven't resurrected it and made it practical. Whereas zero sum is endemic in this whole game theory thing, because when they win, somebody has to lose, and that's endemic in their how they deal. They don't want cooperation. They don't want fair trade. They don't want equal opportunity. They want monopoly and control.
Hmm. Good points you make. A few more comments have come in. Let me acknowledge those comments. We were talking about Donald Trump's deployments. Queen Mother Kashiba writes, this is a prelude to quelling the people's revolt against Donald Trump when the ish hits the fan. And I do think that's a good point she makes. Trump took away $1 billion away from DC. If he would put that money back, then maybe the city could use that money to fight crime. And I think that sounds like a good long-term viable solution. Of course, that's relying upon Trump to do something before something else happens. Osei Kamau is in the house. He says, if you're against livable wages, cut services that were set up to help people, raise rents and housing, making it unaffordable, what should we expect other than rising crime rates? And he's making a good point in this growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. We should expect to see, it would be illogical to not see crime rates rising under those circumstances.
But it's also, you're going to see frustration because the people who supported Donald Trump were duped. He said, make America great. He was going to bring jobs back. He was going to reindustrialize and reinvigorate the economy. He hasn't done it. When we look at the economy, and I wanted to talk about some things later on in the program, there's going to be more and more frustration. There's going to be more and more angst. There's going to be more and more just dissatisfaction when you're seeing these billions and trillions of dollars being sent overseas for these wars, and the American infrastructure is crumbling. There's no plan to help the infrastructure. So even by chance, even some kind of miracle that these jobs, these factories were going to return, and they're not. You don't have the infrastructure to support them if they did come back. I mean, and I'm not even talking about the fact that the few that come back are going to be using animation and robotics to thrive. Look at the TV commercials about the auto manufacturers. They show you humans assembling the cars, when in fact, in reality, most of the work is done by robots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other layer that I would add to what Brother Kamal said in addressing his statement is that you're also, aside from poverty and lack of resources, etc., which he mentioned, unless you change the cultural values perpetrated through the media, through movies, television, magazines. Unless you also change that, you're not going to see a. My argument is that you're not going to see crime improve, because the prevailing American social mores is one of lawlessness, rugged individualism, and I mean, just take throwing up the bird or the middle finger as an example. That is rooted in and as an anti-social statement, meaning no one matters except for me. Move out of my way because I'm more important. You know, I'm hard pressed to drive down the street nowadays without getting flipped off by someone who has cut me off. I have done nothing wrong. I'm staying in my lane. I'm going the speed limit, but I get cut off and flipped off. And so this whole attitude of I am more important than everyone else, and where I'm going is more important than everyone else. That is what needs to change if we're also going to see morality, which Baba Junius always talks to us about, is that reinstatement, that restoration of values and decency. If we're going to see that, then the pop cultural paradigm has to change as well.
But keep in mind, the pop cultural dynamic has increased.
Mm-hmm.
We are of the age group where there was a limited number of media outlets in whatever, they call them markets, whatever city or market you lived in. The most you might have had when you had the UHF channels was maybe 4. Then they added the VHF channels.
Mm-hmm.
Now you literally have thousands of opportunities to be bombarded with this filth, this degeneracy, that promotes crime, that promotes incivility, that promotes all the negativity, the gender dysphoria, which is going to get worse, by the way, become even more graphic on, the streaming services. And so we know it's coming, just like we know and we knew that the policies for the COVID were detrimental and were going to have a long-term negative impact. They did it, and they used fear. What they're using with this is progress. We're moving forward. You got to have it, or you don't count. You have to be a part of this, and you too can be an influencer. You too can be a creative, and so that's what we're seeing, an explosion. And so our experience, both here on the mastermind and personally, is when we assert ourselves as creatives and influencers, they're actively trying to deplatform us, demonetize us. We get lost in the sauce with the algorithms. And so it's obvious, just if you're just looking back in the 90s, the positive and conscious rappers, they gained a toehold for a minute, and then they saw how impactful they could be, and they were eventually marginalized. You count them on one hand.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points as you make. We are giving a lot of time to domestic issues and domestic points of view. I had pulled up a number of stories from the mother continent that I'm hoping we'll get a chance to get in. And there, you had just mentioned, you had mentioned COVID. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember what you had mentioned, but did you just mention that, or did I read something else in the background?
No, I was mentioning how we knew that the so-called treatment modalities,
That's
the
right.
lockdowns, the isolation, the changes in protocol for treatment, we're going to have a major disruptive and hellacious impact on society. And we're seeing it proven out now.
That's right.
Just look at the young people who were born and came up through that whole piece. Just look at the trauma and mental illness that they're going through.
And then when we consider the number of what John Henry Clark called the compradors
Hmm.
in our community, those who were being paid to usher us into the queue lines. The number of compradors in our community, for me, was overwhelming. I'm yes, other communities had and still have compradors cooperating, collaborating with the great lie as we perceived it to be. I thought that our compradors, maybe we should have known better. Were not people reading Harriet Washington? Were people not remembering the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, et cetera, et cetera? Did people not listen to me and others who were well informed, insightful, and could read the peer reviewed journals and point out those major contradictions in these things?
Not to
Apparently
mention,
not.
no, it's so true. I was actually writing about that a couple years ago. Uh, we didn't listen to you, Baba Kitty. We didn't listen to you, Baba Juniors. We didn't listen to Mama Marimba Ani, who spoke on this as well. We didn't listen to Baba Ancestor Del Jones. We didn't listen to Baba Curtis Cost.
Hmm.
We didn't listen to Baba Ancestor Laila O Africa. The information is out here. It is available, but for some reason, that machine, that propaganda machine, as Asada Shakur called it, she said it's running 24/7, 365 days a year. It never shuts off. And so that is the purpose, in part, of LIB, is to give that alternative perspective. And that's why I have been a almost 20-year long supporter of it and will continue to do so. And so you're still fund driving, correct, Baba Kitty?
Yeah, it's all month of Black August Fund Drive. Please don't ask me, not right now, maybe a little bit later. Please don't ask me how well it's going. It'll make me sad. I don't want to get sad that early in the show today. So let's keep me happy as long as you can. But the fund drive, a lot more could be expected of a fund drive. Back in those days when you first started supporting us, and Queen Mother Kasiba and a number of others have been with us all along. Back in those days, I can recall a month-long LIB radio fund drive one time raised over $20,000.
Wow.
Nowadays, it's like if it raises $600, it's a miracle.
Well, let's get some contributions and donations in, and maybe
Yeah.
that'll keep you happy throughout the rest of the program.
We'll do the best we can. I did see a story today, and I did drop this in the various boxes. Let me put it up here on for our YouTube family as well. This is a very serious story. It reads headline, Africa's ancient enemy, malaria, and its influence on COVID-19. Now, this story is very important. I'm sure you guys have heard the story of my own personal experience too many times. I was in Uganda in 2022, and while in Uganda, I came down with malaria. Malaria is a very serious disease. It did take the life of Nana Balfour, Asa Hilliard, and so we consider malaria to be very, very serious disease. This article says, and I'll just make it real briefly. It says, All Africa speaks with Dr. Jane Achan, who led her team at Malaria Consortium in one of the highlights of this series of articles. The pioneering research which reveals the complex relationship between malaria and long COVID in Ethiopia and Uganda. Now, I'm just going to kind of cut in right there. There's much, much more to the story. But this question of long COVID, from my understanding, long COVID is covering up the existence of comorbidities. You have a long COVID, If you happen to be diagnosed with COVID, but you have diabetes, it's going to continue. Your diabetes is going to continue until you get rid of the diabetes. It's going to be the same if you have cancer and a number of other things. Let alone, this doesn't even introduce the idea of the vaccines causing myocardial infarction, amyloidosis, brutal cancer, heavy cancer. They're calling it turbo cancer. That's it's not a realistic tune or terminology according to the AMA, but people who are dealing with cancer saying this is rapid onset, it's very severe, it's turbo cancer. And there are other collapses of the immune system and things that are going on. I contend that the malaria that I had was I was diagnosed in Uganda as maybe among the very first cases of COVID in the country. I knew it was malaria. I know malaria very well, but nonetheless, it just goes on like this. So my point is, this article is pointing out that there are now, because they have linked malaria to COVID, they're now saying Africans are susceptible to long COVID in Ethiopia and Uganda.
So
Your
my
thoughts?
question to you is, what is this a replica of? What other condition blew up in the 80s and 90s that was very similar to this?
It was almost the exact parallel, and that was HIV caused AIDS.
Exactly.
While the evidence for HIV was very thin at best, because no one, looking all through the AIDS literature, and I have it all in folders here, looking all through that AIDS literature, you never could find anyone that definitively said AIDS is caused by HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. There was the idea that AIDS was caused by, what was his name? Oh, I can't remember his name. He wanted his Nobel Prize, but he didn't get it, although the co-discoverer of AIDS did get a Nobel Prize, and that was the Frenchman. And right now, if I can't think of their names, I'm going to stop trying to think of it, because I talked about AIDS for so long that I don't even want to remember the names of all of the players. But the thing was never really proven from the very beginning. There was never any definitive proof that HIV isolated caused AIDS.
Well, the other thing is one of your many reports on that, talked about comorbidities, what we're now calling comorbidities, but you were talking about underlying factors like malnutrition, poor quality of water, not having potable water, and a whole series of interrelated, connected conditions that were being painted over with the HIV/AIDS brush, which is the exact same thing that happened with COVID. And so
that's right.
You have to, and I always say it, and we talked about it last week, their playbook is very thin, mainly because the stuff that they use works. They're able to get over on people time and time again. And you can go back into history and periodically look and say, hey, wait a minute, that's the same thing they did with the bird flu. That's the same thing they did with such and such. One of the things I want to talk about today, and you mentioned it, but without calling that term, is dysregulated immune system.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is what is going on, where your own immune system is malfunctioning, has been compromised, and in often cases, it is actively attacking your own organisms.
Yeah, it's called autoimmune disease at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, the issues is you're starting to see that in the literature now.
That's right. And dysregulated immune system means that your ability to keep your immune system functioning the way it's supposed to be functioning autonomously has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by a number of different lifestyle engagements that we participate with, which the number one is just acting in concert with the Western medical system has a strong tendency to dysregulate one's immune system.
I just posted a an article, a Slate News article in the private chat. It says major study: long COVID caused by vaccines, not virus. And so this is indicating that long COVID is actually a side effect of mRNA vaccines or injections, and not the
Well,
virus.
but if you look at Slay today, there are at least 4 or 5 articles with that similar theme.
Exactly. Every day on Slate News, they do a very good job of keeping up from around the world of the different things that this is. I mean, it's hitting the gallbladder, it's hitting the liver, it's hitting the brain, it's hitting the eyes. They've now connected some type of I'm not sure the technical term off the top of my head, but when one eye shifts and is moving independently of the other eye, they've connected that as well. Reproductive, fertility, gallbladder, lungs, heart.
It's so bad now that they can't. It's like the little boy with the finger in the dike, and the dike is starting to break, where before they could suppress it, they could marginalize, they could just attack anybody who came out against their narrative. Now there's so many studies coming out, and a couple of weeks ago, one of the things, there's like a couple of thousand studies, peer-reviewed studies.
Yeah.
And we talked about this. Every single study indicated COVID era, pandemic, lockdown, school closures, social isolation, found pandemic area children were worse behaved, worse at solving problems, lower communication skills, learning language skills, social interaction, handling emotional situations, and physical capabilities. And that's the article on Brownstone, and on and on and on. So the dam is breaking, but no one's going to be held accountable for this. And we knew this was going to happen. In fact, I saw studies from Johns Hopkins prior to the outbreak of COVID that talked about these kind of treatment modalities not working, or the negative benefits of that. Because first of all, Johns Hopkins was in on it. They knew what was coming because they were part of 201. So
yeah, John Hopkins was in on it even before it happened.
Yeah.
Whew. Make me want to holler, throw up both my hands. But
now,
we're going to continue.
What is happening? What is the response? Because I saw that last week on All Africa. What is the response? Because I think it was in Malawi. Was that where it was, where the outbreak had started? It was one of. So what has been their response? Are they rejecting that, or are they buying into that?
The Africans pretty much, it's hard to say. On one hand, the African compradors go along with everything the West says about health in Africa. But if you look deep and deep and deep enough, the dissidents in Africa have a tendency to do a good job of getting it right. We could look at Ebola as a case of the Africans came up with a solution to Ebola way before the West even implemented the solution. And when the West did implement the solution, they kept it secret. If you can recall, when people had, some Americans had been diagnosed in one of the many different Ebola outbreaks, and I think it was in Western Africa outbreak, they came to the United States and they went to, I think, the CDC or whatever, and they got a certain treatment that dealt with plasma transfer from the bodies of other people who had been diagnosed with with Ebola in Africa and had recovered from it. It was that blood plasma transfer, and I have the terminology. Let me just see. I have it in my book because most of us have never heard of this, but it has become a more standardized procedure now in Western medicine, and I'll have to go to the glossary of my book, and it's called plasma rich something. PRP is what it's called. Let me find it and see if I can have it. But I have it in my book, The Stem Cell Revolution. As we understand what others are doing, we can, no doubt, take advantage of this for our own benefit. But if we just don't get it, then we just don't get it. I'm not seeing the terminology here. I'll find it in just a second. But it dealt with taking plasma from our bodies, from someone else's body, or our body could be transferred. And this plasma, of course, contains immunoglobulin, meaning the person has experienced this outbreak before, and they just transfer it into another person. I'll think of the term in just a minute. But we could do better than what we have been doing.
But see, one of the things that you're always talking about in terms of taking charge, taking responsibility, and personal accountability, the number one factor is your health and how you have agency over that. We still can make choices. We can still choose not to eat the GMO foods. We can still choose to formulate nutritious diets and go on regimens that encourage nutrition and well-being as opposed to destroying our health. We have abdicated that responsibility as a people, partly because of the food deserts in our community, partly because of the advertising, the lifestyle, or better said, death style, and partly because of ignorance. And when I say this, I'm not saying there's a lack of intelligence. I'm saying there's a lack of awareness, a lack of information, because you look at how much money is spent on advertisement. And again, it's deception, it's deceit, it's non-reality to get you to buy and consume that stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And it's all part of that larger depopulation agenda, that population control agenda. And I have started making a list, and I'll quickly read the list. Feel free to contribute to it if you feel that I've missed something. So in terms of the depopulation and population control agenda, I have listed abortion, which I'll get to in a little bit as well. I have a very interesting article on that. I have abortion, feminism, and I'm also including misogyny as its counterbalance, because there is that MGTOW movement of men going the other way, men not having anything to do with women as well. So that's dual, right? LGBT and gender ideology. I have toxic chemicals, which includes pesticides. That's another topic I want to hit a little bit later. Poisonous foods, which we just mentioned. Fluoridated or spiked drinking water. And I have an article from a book that talks about as early as the 1970s. The head of Planned Parenthood at the time had talked about introducing sterilization chemicals into the public drinking water. It was a theory. I'm not saying that it happened, but it was proposed. And then I have GMO crops. That goes back to epicite corn, which we mentioned last week, I believe. And then vaccines or mRNA injections. And then you also have the gender wars. Mass incarceration is a form of population control. Euthanasia, which we're seeing increasingly. TV propaganda and social media use have been seen to decrease fertility rates in different parts of the world. And then the last one I thought of was PFAS, or forever chemicals and microplastics, which are being found in both the testes and the ovaries of every human being in this country anyways that has gone in for a blood sample. And top doctors are now forecasting that reproduction may be impossible in the future due to this accumulation of toxic microplastics and PFAS forever chemicals.
Wow.
Okay,
Listening.
add to your list transhumanism,
Mm.
ecocide, drought, famine, war, and chemtrails.
Mm. Thank you, Lord.
Listening to that list, it reminded me of Brave New World, and the ultimate conclusion after all of that was that they would then start to synthesize the birthing process by basically test tube babies.
Yeah.
Well, they have a
Designer,
robot.
CRISPR, designer babies. You can add that to the list.
Thank you. And did y'all see? I have to pull this up in the background. Did y'all see that? They have supposedly invented a robot which is potentially capable of carrying
I saw that.
of getting pregnant and carrying a fetus to
Yeah.
full term and
Surrogate.
then
Yeah.
delivering it.
Surrogate
Exactly.
robots. Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they do have males that are practicing on those robots right now. So when those robots are ready to conceive, those men or those males will have practiced up to it. I'm saying a joke, but it's not
Yeah.
funny.
That's sarcasm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sarcasm. we
Facetious. Yeah.
we are live here on LAB Radio. We have a few more comments have come in from our listening audience. I'll just read just a couple of them. Queen Mother Kashiba, right on, Mr. D. Dwara. I like what you are saying. Ed Elmack is in the house. Trump and his people seem to be doing damage control with the National Guard being called in. The more and more they implement the big, beautiful bill, the more people start losing their jobs, and this benefits more of his supporters will start to turn on him. Rory 10X writes, Sister Mayor recently signed on a $1.1 billion commitment to the billionaire owners of the football team to build a new stadium to house the millionaire players. Mm. City planners are supposedly going door to door with the National Guard assessing the city's housing stock and its occupants. And then Gus filled me in on that. Dr. Robert Gallo, I was trying to think of his name for faking the discovery of HIV or HTLV3, he called it. And then he mentioned Dr. Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize winning for discovering HIV. Thanks, Gus. I really appreciate you for filling in that gap inside my head. And a few other comments have come in. So Trump is getting his census. Ed L. Mack responding to Rory X, pointing about Trump is now sending people door to door in D.C. Is Trump using this now as a method of a census?
Well, one of the jobs when I was in grad school, I was in city planning, and one of the make work things that they did for us is we had to go within the model cities area and go door to door with a map, looking at, particularly in the commercial corridors, which buildings were occupied. Was it a commercial building? Was it abandoned? Was it like a storefront church or whatever? So that's normal procedure. But the thing that the brother was just talking about in terms of Trump preparing for the backlash, because there is a backlash coming. One of the things I want to talk about today is corporate bankruptcies are at the highest since 2010. You can go to citizenwatchreport.com. 446 companies have filed for bankruptcy thus far in 2025, and we're just in August. So what does that mean in terms of employment? The other thing is you don't talk about. You see Trump with his fight with Jerome Powell. So you have all these bankruptcies. He wants Powell to lower interest rates, but this is something that no one ever talks about. The U.S. money supply, which is referred to as M2, has reached the highest level in history. So you're talking about 221 942 billions in terms of you're moving into that trillion stage. And the money supply is the real cause of inflation, where you printing more and more money, and so it devalues the money that's already in circulation, and the subsequent devaluation is a direct result that we feel with rising costs, shrinking dollar, be able to buy less and less with our money. And so when people wake up to this and they're all the diversions and the distractions aren't able to take their attention off of this, yeah, you're going to see a lot of distraught people. Now, is it going to be civil war? I don't know, but you're going to see a lot of pushback, just like Trump saw the pushback from his own supporters about the Epstein thing. So if you're upset about Epstein, it's something that you have no control over, that doesn't really impact you unless you're concerned about your moral standing in terms of pedophilia taking over this country, which it is. But now we're talking about basic impact your pocket, impact your quote unquote lifestyle stuff. So when they find this out, it's really going to be interesting. See what happens.
Chat.
There.
Ed L. Mack in the chat, he says, has weather been used as a weapon / population control? Is that one on your list, Brother Dwyer?
Add that.
Yeah, Baba Junius mentioned ecocide.
That's right, ecocide.
Would that be under that category?
Yeah,
that would be.
Then maybe I could put parentheses geoengineering.
Geoengineering, yeah.
And Rory adds, when you get through that list, just conclude that practically every action of most people is an attack on the earth in general and black people in particular. I don't think that that's an unwise position to make. It's a blanket statement, and we do know there are always exceptions. But at this particular point, from Rory's point of view, I would say we are constantly under attack, and we need to be vigilant on literally every front, every action that goes on. We have to ask, is this connected toward annihilation of our people and an attack on Mother Earth herself?
Dwyer mentioned Catherine Austin Fitch last week. Her salary report, their last quarterly report, was all about omnicide, where they look at this attack. You referred to it as like World War V or World War VI in your book, but she's, and that whole issue deals with the various attacks on the various aspects of our lives. And it's really going on. Most people are unaware of it mainly because of the mind control apparatus.
Yeah.
It's distracting.
Yeah. Specifically, the distinction between World Wars V and World War VI that I write about in the book Disaster Preparedness for World Wars V and VI is that World War V deals with more the corporations and the corporate power, the corporate infrastructure, whereas World War VI is a more traditional alignment of NATO forces against BRICS forces.
I see. Using just quickly two of the things mentioned on the list, I have an article from Slay which says World Health Organization data, abortion reduced global Gen Z population of humans by 29%. And then I have another article on zenit.org that says approximately 19.5 million unborn children from that generation, Gen Z, from that generational cohort were lost to abortion. And then it goes on to say analysis shows that almost a third of Gen Z does not exist due to abortion. So that is one example of the depopulation / population control agenda. And I'll post those up in the private chat in a minute. But I also have this other very interesting article that I ran across. This is the city of Worcester, Massachusetts, right in the middle of the state of Massachusetts. West Nile virus detected in mosquito sample, spraying scheduled. Now, this is very interesting. It goes on to say that West Nile virus has been detected in mosquitoes collected from a trap site. Now, first off, how mosquitoes can only be found within one city and not spill over into outlying towns or other areas is beyond me. Somehow these mosquitoes must be smart mosquitoes, because they only section themselves within certain neighborhoods, according to this this post for immediate release, which was posted on the 22nd of this month, so just a few days ago. And then it goes on to say that specific areas to be sprayed will be posted on the website. And then additional alerts will be sent in cases of mosquito-borne illness are detected and necessitate emergency spraying. And they say further that no aerial spraying is planned at this time. So it's not that they're not capable of that. It's maybe not that they haven't done that in the past. So we have to connect that with these vaccine mists, these mRNA mists, and nasal sprays that they have come up with as a remedy to a needle injection. And so I'm kind of combining all this, but listen to this last part. Residents are advised to observe the following precautions if their area is being sprayed. And it'd be very interesting to know exactly what areas are being sprayed, because Worcester, Massachusetts, in the Northeast anyways, has been a hotbed for ICE activity. And there's been a lot of protests and a lot of confrontations with ICE officers in that specific city. So they said to close street-facing windows and turn off any outside air settings on air conditioners. Keep pets inside between sunset and midnight, and do not let children play near or behind truck-mounted spray applicators when they are in use. Remain inside during the application. Maybe a form of mini martial law, or a mini lockdown in that sense. 15 to 20 minutes afterwards, and then wash any vegetables from home gardens after spraying and before consuming them. This, to me, sounds draconian enough and could be misused in the future. So I just wanted to call our attention to that. Very interesting.
Well, we're experiencing some of that here in Camden County in New Jersey. They just had something that on one of the TV stations, and there's certain areas being targeted, and they're telling people to be aware of any standing water. It's not just the mosquitoes; it's the West Nile has popped up, so they're going to intensify their spraying. So it's not just up there; it's happening down here too.
Yeah. So I guess that begs the question. How does one know that West Nile virus is being detected? And I know they have their science and they have these mosquito traps that they talk about. I'm implying that could be misused. That's a theory. And two, we know about predictive programming, which Baba Junius always reminds us about predictive programming. And so the softening of these methods being used to prepare future generations for the total acceptance of this. And one of the proposed or one of the concerns is that Bill Gates, Gavi, and all that are perhaps thinking about and have even proposed crop dusting entire cities with mist-like injections or mRNA type applications to to vaccinate people. And then, I also saw another article that said Pentagon secretly advancing self-spreading vaccine development as well.
But don't forget that Bill Gates had has a program to, I think this is GMO mosquitoes.
Yes.
And that's supposed to be some kind of public health project that are going to supposedly use these mosquitoes as a means to deal with certain diseases.
Right. It's all pretty freaky.
No, but what we're seeing is a ramping up of what used to be considered as science fiction. And again, a lot of that was predictive programming, preparatory programming to get our consciousness to accept the plausibility of something like that, to now it's becoming real. I mean, I saw in the past couple of months this summer, I saw references to the Hanna-Barbera Jetsons TV series in terms of what's developing in terms of autonomous devices and lifestyle changes now that are now in place, not being contemplated for the future, but that are now in operation.
When you say that, Baba, it makes me think that maybe this technology, as I like to call it, is at its deepest heart anti-Ubuntu and anti-communalism, because a lot of these things are designed for one to be autonomous and independent and not need to rely on other human beings. And that is in absolute contradiction and opposition to the deepest and most core fundamental values and virtues of our ancestors.
Well, that's why the so-called remediation of isolation was so devastating. We are at our core social people.
That's right.
Various people, particularly African people.
I see.
And we are at our healthy core, might I add.
Right. Because for Africans, treating health is not a personal protocol. It's a social protocol.
That's right.
If you're in a village, remember there are no secrets in the village. Everybody has an obligation to look out for one another and to be supportive. So that goes towards health, also health and well-being. And just the whole notion of isolating well people went against hundreds of years of protocol. The protocol was you isolate the sick person. You isolate the person that has the fever, has the symptoms. And just to shut people off and this further intergenerational disconnection is traumatic, and we're seeing the results of that right now.
Yeah. And earlier when you were putting together the list of anti-fertility lifestyle that you were assembling, one thing that immediately came to my mind was they call them incels, I think is the terminology. These are unintentional celibate people who have essentially become socially adapted to keeping themselves out of the gene pool.
Yeah, exactly. Involuntary celibates and
involuntary celibates. Good point.
I'm kind of loosely branching that under misogyny, in the sense that many of them, ironically, many of them have resorted to violence, to be quite frankly honest with you. And many of them have resorted to violence against women. And so there is this kind of underlying hatred of the continuation of the Eurasian or the Uruguayan legacy of the battle of the sexes. And so whenever I talk about feminism, which to me is really a hatred for men, or a despising of masculinity. I always want to mention misogyny as well, because that is the other component, and I would personally put incels in that category.
Mm-hmm. And when you
Feminism is in many ways is an outgrowth of the anti-feminine consciousness of Urugu. When you look at this unbalanced culture that Urugu perpetuates, this patriarchy, that was an organized resistance to it. Now, obviously, they had other incentives. They had people who were pushing this as a way of disrupting society, of the current social order, social status. But deep down inside, the male patriarchy and the that homosexual vein that runs through Urugu is predominant, and I think in many ways it caught on because white women were tired of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you
be duped and manipulated.
When you were talking about incels and misogyny, it reminded me of the dog whisperer. Can't think of his name right now. You know who I'm talking about, the dog whisperer,
Yes,
who talked about people who had male dogs that were not sterilized or castrated or whatever you call them, neutered, that the male dogs would become aggressive against everyone because of their inability to fulfill this fundamental need. If they couldn't eat and if they couldn't have sex, then the male dogs would become dysfunctional, increasingly psychological dysfunctional. Doesn't that remind you of this kind of psychological dysfunction of the involuntary, involuntary celibates?
I would say that is probably one of the most profound things I've heard in the last couple of months, because I'm going to tie this historically back specifically to the Akan. When men went to war, specifically, when the Akan, when the Ashanti, when the Fanti went to war, there was this spiritual bloodlust that had to be cultivated. And man is good at that. See, I'm not for shaming men and talking about toxic masculinity, because there is a point at certain, unfortunately, in certain aspects of life, there is a point when a man has to defend himself, his family, his community, his village. And in those moments, what they call violence, which Malcolm X made a very clear distinction about as being self-defense. When one has to defend oneself, when one has to so-called go there, that is needed. That is a part of the human experience. I do not want to dismiss that at all. So when these warriors, when these Akan warriors would come back, they knew in that almost spiritual mindset that a man has to go to in order to potentially take life, to protect the village, to protect the community. They can't just be reintegrated into the community. And so what happened is there were specific older women, specifically older women, that would have sexual intercourse with the warriors to absorb and release and almost contain that spiritual warfare mindset so that they could be reintroduced into the community. That was not a form of promiscuity. I want to be very clear. And, if in our humanness, in our Ubuntu-ness, older women, they need affection and love as well. And so we see with our ancestors, their solutions helped everybody. Okay. Just because someone is a widow, and typically I think they tended to be widows. So they were, in essence, afforded sexual affection, but not in an unrighteous or a promiscuous way. Their role was to be, as the powerful containers of energy that they are, were the only ones that could absorb that energy. And in that sense, it was seen as that sexual energy transference enabled the warriors to come back to a human mindset and to be reintroduced into the community. So I think your point, Baba Kiti, is so spot on, in that when men do not have the opportunity to experience the sexual bonding between themselves and a woman that they are committed to, then I would agree violence does occur.
And
Yeah.
just as a point, one of the reasons that rape is so prevalent in these conflicts.
War zones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not just for the Eurasians, but also for the Africans. Now, keep in
That's
mind,
right.
we're not in our right minds.
Right.
Because one of the things that on a higher level culture, they taught transmutation. How do you transfer a type of energy and focus it into something else?
I see.
And so once that knowledge and that wisdom was taken away from us, and we're down at the rawest element that you were talking about in terms of force to kill or be killed,
right,
that goes away. If you don't have a leadership that's mature enough to understand how do you bring down that kill or be killed mentality, how do you transmute that into something positive? And the farther we get away from our ancient African wisdom and understanding and understanding, the more rabid we become and the more out of control we become. Because the key to our stability in our societies, in our cultures, our indigenous and native cultures, was peer pressure. We didn't have police forces. Yeah, we did have, if you were acting totally out, wilding out and all that kind of stuff, you might get a visit from the stilt walkers or somebody, or the society or somebody.
The masquerade, right?
Yeah, but for the most part, it was based on peer pressure. So, and a whole value system of good character. It's foolish for us to think that all Africans were princely, kingly, queenly, princessesly. Like, there was some deviation. There was always various consciousness within the community, but it was dealt with because they focused on on our nature, and they developed ways to keep that type of behavior in check. And it was really peer pressure and intergenerational peer pressure that did it, because we didn't have police.
Right, and I agree with you that violence was usually a last resort, and that you would just be exiled for a certain amount of time, and guess what? Usually always allowed to come back if you could conform to the societal norms.
Well, but see, a lot of times those that were expelled and exiled had proven that they were recalcitrant, that they just could not within themselves abide by the rules. So many of them were permanently exiled or banished from the community. And I was in a group, and they're just like everybody has a cosmology. All the groups have. That was our explanation about Urugu. They were the people who were banished from society. They were the malcontents. They were the recalcitrant. They were the psychopaths.
Right.
But they were also the lepers. They were also some other groupings that posed a danger to the larger community. And even in their worst, they were still used to being in a group. It's just that they couldn't buy into Ubuntu or Ma'at. So they became the leaders of these outcasts. And of course, we see the type of behavior that that manifests from that.
Few comments in the chat room and the Rumble. Queen Mother Kashiba, have you discussed the introduction of a genetically modified mosquito to mate with normal mosquitoes to eliminate malaria? Genetically modified mosquito to eliminate malaria. Yeah, that has been one of the programs Bill Gates has been financing in Africa. They are sterilizing the male mosquitoes. Therefore, that's a whole nother subject of how they're sterilizing the male mosquitoes. It's chemically done. And then they are released now into the larger population intended to mate with the females, but of course the mating will not take place. And personally, I think introducing the idea of sterilizing chemicals into into nature, in the atmosphere, is part of the eco side that Baba Junius was talking about.
Yeah, man.
Any comment on that?
Well, I'm sorry, real sorry to cut in real quick. I'm making a joke, but it may not be far from the truth. That so what happens when you get bit by one of these sterilized male mosquitoes? Do you then too become sterilized?
Well, you will turn into a vampire.
Oh.
But fortunately, the male mosquitoes do not bite. The females, it is the female mosquitoes that are responsible for the blood sucking behavior.
So when a male mosquito that doesn't bite mates with a regular mosquito, non-GMO, is she then responsible when biting you for causing sterilization?
Well, we're getting into the realm of ridiculous speculation.
I apologize.
How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Kind of thing.
Yeah. I would say that the male mosquito, having been sterilized, who's to say he's going to mate with a female mosquito? Why don't he just say, hey, I ain't going to be doing nothing anyways. Let me just dance with whoever wants to get busy with it. So therefore, look for the rise of a new transquito variety now for the world.
Occam's razor, right?
But all of this is part and parcel to the mindset of Yoruba, where they
That's
are
right.
definitively attempting to usurp the natural order and change it from what the Creator intended, what the Creator does to maintain it and sustain it, into their own just psychopathic and dystopian world. I call it like bizarro world.
A few more comments have come in. I think we've all kind of entered the realm of ridiculous at this point. We talked about Ed Elmac. Are we headed for a great reset like the Great Flood? Isn't it said that the flood was to kill the giants, those that came to earth and mated with human women? And was it these great giants that came to earth and mated with human women? I don't have any evidence of that, but you may know things that I don't know.
But that's one of the myths, the Anunnaki and
the Nephilim.
Yeah, that has been propagated as a reason to explain why things are and why humanity has been subjugated and is being used by these other beings. So, but again, that's a theory or a myth, or there's some kind of background that goes back to Mesopotamia about that.
Well, I could say one good thing about these alien giants who came to Earth and mated with women is that they did build the pyramids and leave the pyramids for us.
Yeah. Not only that, I mean, when you look at it, according to them, it's not just the pyramids in Giza; it's the pyramids all over the planet.
Yeah, the pyramids all over the planet. And Fortunately, let me leave this alone because they did build those pyramids out of mud and straw. That's a whole nother myth.
Yeah, yeah, and they had a lot of captive labor to help them as well. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Let's keep going. Queen Mother Kashiba, what else is occurring on the African continent these days? Baba Junia is in the house. Juma is in the house. He says, soul is separation still always the goal for Africans? I would say that's not bad. And Queen Mother Kashiba writes, the female mosquito cannot produce any offspring after having mated with these alien giant male mosquitoes. So, going to answer Queen Mother's question, I did pull up a number of different stories. We talked about the malaria and its influence on long COVID. This is another one. Let me prioritize a couple of these. U.S. court jails 3 Nigerians were jailed over COVID-19 fraud scheme. This story is on allamerica.com, and it basically comes down to these Nigerians were accused of using false um, employment records to scheme money out of the COVID compensation program. But my problem with that is, and I have no problem with prosecuting people for breaking the law, but if we look at the number of fraud about surrounding COVID-19, you'd have to maybe double the prison capacity of this country for all of the fraudulent claims and fraudulent schemes around this whole COVID-19. Would one exclude Anthony Fauci from prosecution under such fraud?
Yeah, but you got to look at even fraud that was endemic that nobody talks about. Remember the stimulus money?
Yeah, yeah.
Under Trump. Remember the other programs that they put into effect that were done, and they just gave all the money to BlackRock with no oversight whatsoever. So
That's
that was
right.
clear in the just invitation to fraud. But you're never going to hear anything about that. Trump is not going to touch it. Nobody else is going to touch it. BlackRock just got over big time.
Mm.
And they bought off the American people by, what was it? They gave everybody $1,600 or whatever the amount of money was. So we were all complicit in being ripped off, taking our tax money. That's all part of the trillions of dollars that Catherine Austin Fitts and Professor Skidmore talk about that was ripped off from the people. And that's not even counted in that $21 trillion figure. That's something that's separate altogether.
Yeah, it was crazy. Did you want to comment on the Nigerians being arrested, Brother Dwara, or should I go to another story?
no, you can go to another story, please, Baba.
The next story I have on, let me just share the link to that one so people can have access to that link. I put that up on the Rumble. I put it up on the Facebook as well. The next story is definitely, I love this story. Tanzania aims to be the global leader in traditional medicine.
Mm.
From allafrica.com, just real briefly, Tanzania aims to be the global leader in traditional medicine. The head of Tanzania's National Institute for Medical Research, Said Aboud, has said his country is striving to become a key player in global traditional medicine and pharmaceutical industries by leveraging its biodiversity and strategic partnerships to advance scientific research. We do know that in the early days of the COVID, John Pemba Magufuli, the ancestor who was at that time the head of the Tanzanian government, the prime minister, or the president, he, along in partnership with Madagascar, did develop COVID organics, a compound which consisted of a number of different indigenous African herbs, including Artemisia annua, which was designed as a prophylactic against COVID, and it did was very successful in preventing a major outbreak of COVID, not only in Tanzania and Madagascar, but I think there were a total of 19 African nations that took large shipments of COVID organics. And I wrote about it in my book, what was it called? Forged by
Oh,
Fire.
right.
I wrote about it in that book and documented it when it came to the issue of COVID compared to America and the other European countries. Africans had tremendous success beating it down, but that story never did get much propaganda other than those of us who knew about it wrote about it.
Well, that was par for the course on that whole era. Anyone who suggested anything contrary to the narrative was marginalized at the least, or even eliminated or neutralized. That many feel that His Excellency Magufuli was.
Yeah. So, a good story. Tanzania traditional African medicine, TAM, is something we should seriously take a look at. In the book I wrote called The Global Wellness Economy, and it was the global wellness economy was expected to expand from 2023. It was at $5.5 billion, no, $5.5 trillion. The global wellness economy was expected to expand to $8.1 trillion sometime by 2027 or at latest 2028. So the book was intended to ask the question, where is this $2.9 trillion expected to show up at? And how much, if we knew it in advance, 3.5 years in advance, we knew there was going to be 2.9 trillion to $3.1 trillion showing up in the global economy. How much of that expansion would we as Africans claim for ourselves? It's still not too late, but I do not have anything positive to report about our claiming that, other than this article now from Tanzania, that Tanzanian government intends to claim a significant part of that new economy. That's one of the main purposes of the Kujichagulia villages, was to build these health and wellness retreats, but we're not financing that.
Mhm.
Well, it gets back to game theory. It gets back to initiative. It gets back to the brain drain. A lot of these compradors were some of them were very bright, very accomplished people that either were coerced into going along with the COVID narrative, or they saw an opportunity to get 15 minutes of fame and some fortune or position or whatever to go along with this, despite hundreds of years of history of how the medical establishment has dealt with our people in this country, let alone the
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we can do better than that. There's another story I want to put on the table. Uganda strikes deal with Washington over migrants deported from the U.S. You probably have heard the story. 22, this is from Radio France International. The article states that Uganda, which has Africa's largest refugee population, I thought it was Ethiopia, but no, it's Uganda, or Rwanda as well, has become the latest African country to agree to take in failed asylum seekers deported from the U.S. under President Donald Trump's controversial deportation drive. The announcement was made on Thursday by a senior Ugandan foreign ministry official, puts the country among a handful of African and Latin American countries cooperating with the Trump administration on resettlement arrangements. I know Ethiopia and Rwanda both have a very strong reputation for taking in political and economic refugees from around the world.
But this case, because I was going to talk about this today. Trump wants to deport Kilmer Abrego Garcia to Uganda,
Mm-hmm.
subject to whether or not he accepts a plea deal. And so my concern is that I'm all for being open and accepting refugees. But my concern is we've seen what happens when the Europeans use other continents and other people to dump their riffraff. Remember, Georgia was a penal colony. Australia, New Zealand were penal colonies. And I don't think it bodes well for Africans to bring into their midst some of these people, particularly that Trump wants to deport. So,
Well, the other side of that is if we should choose to include ourselves in the group, the African countries will also accept every one of us. I think it's not just a matter of the refugee status, but I think that the Ugandans and others believe that these people will be contributors to the growth and development of their societies. And personally, from that perspective, I agree. I would put myself and our people, our Pan Africanists, in the front of that line.
Yeah,
well,
I
I
agree.
think we're talking about several different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about refugees, people who are being displaced. I'm talking about people that Trump views as criminals and
Mm-hmm.
given an option. I remember when I was working, I was a probation officer. A lot of times judges would give, and I was a juvenile probation officer. A lot of times judges would give young men the alternative: sign up for the military or deal with the court system, meaning being placed somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
this was like in the 70s, so the Vietnam War was still going on. But that was an option that the judges used. And I'm just not for taking malefactors and dumping them somewhere else.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely do agree with that. That is only going to be a problem. That reminds me, Brother Dwara, people would make the claim about the or Kujijagalia villages or the repatriating Pan Africans take the brothers out of the prison system and send them to Africa or to the Kujijagalia villages or whatever. I would say, well, we would be better in dealing with them in the villages, get them ready before sending these ex-prisoners, ex-convicts to Africa.
Right, right. No, I wholeheartedly agree. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, the understanding of energy transference, the trauma that is experienced in incarceration when one is locked up in the penitentiary, the trauma, the exposure to violence, sometimes even sexual violence. It that needs to be addressed. That needs to be healed and remedied before reintroducing our brothers and sisters that are coming home from the penitentiary into an environment of Ma'at and of Ubuntu.
Plus,
That's right. That's
we
right.
have to almost deregimatize them because they have a regimen. They're told when to get up, when to eat, what their time is very regulated and regimentized. And a lot of times we've seen once they're discharged, they can't deal with the quote unquote freedom. And because I know I had a former brother-in-law, he got out and went right back to his antisocial behavior because he couldn't deal with freedom. And he couldn't, primarily it was drug addiction. And that's what drove him into antisocial behavior. But once he came out, he just couldn't deal with being out.
Mm-hmm.
He did something just enough to get sent back to a minimum security facility as opposed to a maximum security facility.
You got brothers that have done 30, 40, 50 years in the penitentiary, and their greatest challenge their stated greatest challenge is coming home and trying to figure out how to use a cell phone. But that doesn't address the psychological, the spiritual, the physical trauma that one goes through. You know, we're familiar with the book The Body Keeps the Score by Vander Kolk, and how trauma literally ingrains itself on the cellular level within our bodies. There has to be a program, a mechanism, spiritual base to be able to relieve that. And you're not in that type of hellish Uruguayan Isfetian environment and not come out unscathed. So I wholeheartedly agree.
Mm-hmm. We're going to begin to wrap it up. Let me just get one more comment in from or two more comments in from the chat. Queen Mother Kasiba writes, the Muslim president, you remember, is kicking the Maasai off of their indigenous lands to make a game preserve for wealthy Arabs. Is she trustworthy? And, ooh boy, Africa, 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards. And she points out a good point. The Maasai's traditional lands are necessary for Tanzania's integrity. The Maasai are keepers of the land. The ecocide you were talking about earlier, Junius, the Maasai are keepers of their traditions. And to throw them off their lands in favor of Arab game preserve where Arabs can go and hunt big game, that's insane. So can she be trustworthy? From my perspective, Queen Mother Kasiba, I never trusted her in the first place. I never trusted her for her silence in the aftermath of the killing of John Pemba Magufuli. So you have my answer right there. Anybody else want to weigh in? Could be, she also says, could be about these refugees coming to Uganda. Could be spies, CIA, MI6, or French intelligence. Could be.
Well, wasn't she a key figure either in the World Bank or the IMF? That's why they tapped her to be in that position.
I believe so. Without having my notes handy, I believe it's to be true. And that's not necessarily to disqualify her, but it does require a second glimpse and ask, well, who tapped her? Why was she tapped? She was tapped before John Pemba Magufuli was killed. She was chosen as his vice president.
She was
But
vice
could
president.
yeah. So could it have been that he tapped her for that specific connection, hoping it might be advantageous to the country of Tanzania? It could very well be.
Could be, and it could have been a political compromise worked out through various other factions within the government, and they
Mm-hmm.
felt it was expedient to have her on the ticket, quote unquote ticket, or in the government. We just don't know. But
Yeah, we really don't
I'm
know.
skeptical about people's loyalties once you've been in those positions. You end up owing people favors, or you're trying to curry favor with a lot of folks. So the fact of the matter is, immediately after assuming that position, she immediately reversed all of his policies, COVID and otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're going to begin to wrap it up. Let's do just that. Unless there's any stories we have yet to put on the table. Brother Dwara, did you have anything you wanted to put in?
Yeah, there was an article. Now I realize that it's from over a year ago, but I thought it interesting nonetheless for our viewers to check out. Is an article on the Good News Network, because I'm trying to get back to having at least one good news or two good news articles that we can supply during the show as well. And this one is dated 3/15/2024. African Forest Farming Initiative making a difference to thousands with tree planting and micro lending. So essentially, this NGO is helping our Tanzanian family plant trees but teaching them how to create a business model off of that is Ubuntu and communal in nature. So I thought that was very innovative and interesting. And then last but not least, I wanted to let our LIB viewers know about Elder Mama Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, who is one of our great unsung sheroes amongst our community. And she has something called the H3O, The Art of Life. It's a show on cable access, Chicago cable access television, but she's also got a website and a blog, which I'll put up in the private chat so we can share that with our family. And she is a dear elder. I've been communicating with her for many years now. And in the last couple of days, we had some communications. And it's someone that I would love to see us partner with if possible. And we can talk more about that offline. But I just posted her website, her OmniU University website. And there's just a whole bunch of great content and a lot of great scholars and elders, specifically from the Chicago area, that are doing great works. And just wanted to highlight her, big her up. And then also, of course, wanted to remind our LIB family to please help support LIB Radio. Please buy Baba Kiti's books and disperse them amongst your friends. Kwanzaa is coming up before we know it. So-called Black Friday, I call it Green Friday, and Cyber Monday. Let us invest in our own. If we do not invest in our own and we do not maintain and protect our institutions, then we're going to be thrown to the wolves, as they say. So just urging everyone to continue to support LIB Radio and to also check out H3O, The Art of Life, which can be found on YouTube and the website that I provided as well. Ashe.
Yeah, my closing piece would
Ashe.
iterate what
Robert Junius, any final thoughts you want to share with us, or any stories untold?
Yeah, I would suggest. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Baba Kitty was lagged a little bit.
No, I'll just reiterate what you said.
Yeah, there's a little gap, a little delay on my side.
Well, just continue to support LIB. Search yourself, search your budget, see if you can just increase it. If you have never made a contribution, you can do a one-time contribution. You could be a sustaining member through PayPal or some of the other monetary transfer applications. And just check it out and see what you can. The last piece I want to say is Trump sends U.S. warships and a submarine and troops to Latin America off the coast of Venezuela. And so keep an eye on that.
Yeah, that's the next chapter in this unfolding chaos that Trump is visiting to the world. He is the epitome of what one might term a quote bull in a china shop. Thank you, brothers. You both did great contributions to the program. Ed Elmack has one more closing comment I'm going to read. The many people who have been putting themselves back into the prison system on purpose is a sign of how out of control we so-called free people are. And Ed, I think you're absolutely right with that. You're absolutely right. Queen Mother Kashiba says, hit the like button, people, right now, and make a donation. In your Rumble, right under the chat window, you'll see a dollar sign. People can make a contribution of any amount right there. Or there's a little gift box next to it. You can hit either one of those and make a contribution to our Black August emergency LIB Radio Fund Drive. I'm really weighing the decision about what will be the future of LIB Radio. I know I have to start scaling back my ambitions, and I have to do that. That's a reality. So that's going to unfold. I don't want to stop LIB Radio. Yet I can't afford to continue it. So we're going to figure something somewhere in the middle of that. Thank you, brothers, for your wonderful, wonderful contribution to today's show. I am because we are Ubuntu. That is our motif. That's our motto. And I would thank you, Baba Juniors. Thank you, Brother Duara, for all you do for all of us.
Ashe. Thank you, Baba.
Likewise, Ashe. Be
I
well.
Ashe.
say. And on that note, I'm going to remove the two my comrades from the program. I'm going to say thank you to all of you for all you do for all of your people. It is profound love and respect that you show for your people, and that is very consistent. And I'm so wonderful to be here to witness it, to be an agent toward it all, and to be saying we're going to just continue to move forward ever more forceful in our deliberations. You've been tuned into your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV. We are living in black.com. Tell your friends to tell their friends that we have our own now. We have our own, and ours is pretty good. Give us a chance. Tell your friends. The word is not spreading, so that means people are not telling other like-minded Pan-Africans to join us. But we can do so. It is our choice. You've been tuned into LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. We'll be back tomorrow morning with our broadcast, 9 a.m. Pacific time. We are on every day, all week long, on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.